Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Zayin, Daf 7 of Masechta Yoma. We continue talking about Tumah B'tzibur, machlokas that we saw yesterday. Was it Dafka at the end of the page? I guess so. Gosh, who can remember what's what? But we saw yesterday, it was at the end of the page. We started talking about this machlokas between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes about is Tumah hutra b'tzibur, is Tumah dechuya b'tzibur. This is a machlokas we are very familiar with already from Masechta Pesachim, and then another related and familiar sugya about whether the Tzitz is meratzeh. No big chidushim over here. This is really stuff that we've seen in Masechta Pesachim to an extent. But it's not too complicated. So let us jump in. We will start on Daf Zayin. We're going to start on Daf Zayin on the second line of the page. Rav Sheshes mina aminala. So Rav Sheshes says, "How do I know that I'm right?" So, not exactly. He doesn't exactly say, "How do I know I'm right?" But why do I say what I say? Right? Rav Nachman says Tumah hutra b'tzibur, that when you have in the context of a communal offering, if it becomes tameh, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. No big deal. Bichlal Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Tumah is permitted in the communal context. Don't worry about it. Rav Sheshes says it's not exactly hutra b'tzibur. It's not exactly permitted. It's dechuya. It's b'diavad. If you have a communal offering, it becomes tameh. So you can move forward. It's not ideal. You can move forward with it. It says Rav Sheshes, how do I know that this is the case? That in the context of a communal offering, you could move forward, but it's shtickle b'diavad, and we should really do whatever we can to avoid it. So the Tanya is we learn in the Brayso, Yoma makav minchas ha'omer v'nitmes biyado. You have a fellow, mistama a korban fellow, a Kohen fellow, and he is offering the korban mincha. The korban mincha, of course, we are currently in the period of Sfiras ha'omer. This is the korban ha'omer, right? I think I said korban mincha, I meant korban ha'omer. So it's the barley offering that is offered on the second day of Pesach. So if you have a Kohen and he's offering the korban mincha, the korban ha'omer, okay? So Omer u'makiv minchas ha'omer. So he was standing and he was offering the korban minchas ha'omer. V'nitmeis biyado, and the mincha became tameh. Okay, so it sounds to me like a communal offering that became tameh. Okay. Omer mevin acheres tachteh. So what does he do? Look, if you can get a replacement, get a replacement. V'mein shamelahi. But if the only available barley for the offering is that barley that became tameh, we say, all right, be smart about it and keep your mouth shut. So what do we see? So we see Katanimias Omer mevin acheres tachteh. So argues of Sheshes that the Brayso, after all, says that if you can, bring a replacement. So what do we see? A communal offering became tameh, and we're not saying all good. It's okay, it's a communal offering, it's mutter. We don't say that. We say, okay, look, if you could bring a different one, that would be ideal. If not, so beseder, it works, right? Just don't tell anybody, keep your mouth shut, right? You don't want anybody to start thinking that there are problems, whatever. It works, it's fine. Life goes on. So that certainly sounds like Tumah dechuya hi b'tzibur. Right? It sounds like in the context of a community. So if there's Tumah, you can move forward. It's not going to disqualify it. However, if you could find a replacement, that would be ideal. So it sounds like Tumah dechuya hi b'tzibur. Rav Nachman modina eicha dika shirayim lachila. It says Rav Nachman, if we remember back from Pesachim, who can tell me what the halacha is? You have the majority of Am Yisrael is Tamei Tumas Hameis. So you could bring the Korban Pesach B'tzibur, B'tumah, right? The majority of Am Yisrael is Tamei. So they bring the Korban Pesach in a state of Tumah. However, we said that when the Korban Pesach is brought B'tumah, it's not eaten. It's not going to be eaten B'tumah. It can be brought B'tumah, but it won't be eaten B'tumah. Wait a second, sorry, no, that was a mistake. The Korban Pesach is an exception. If the Korban Pesach is brought b'tumah, it is also eaten b'tumah. However, other korbanis that are brought b'tumah would not be eaten b'tumah. Other communal offerings that are brought b'tumah would not be eaten b'tumah. And therefore, in this case, Rav Nachman says, look, when it comes to the Korban HaOmer, if it were to be offered b'tumah, right, Rav Nachman says, look, Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Tumah is allowed, completely permitted when it's in the context of a congregation, of the community. So then how come we're saying bring a different Korban HaOmer if you can, even though it's a communal offering? Because since the Korban HaOmer, you take a kometz and you put that on the mizbeach, but the rest of it you can eat. Well, if the offering is tameh, well then the kohen won't be able to eat it, and we want him to be able to eat it. So therefore we say, if you could bring a different one, bring that so that at least he'll be able to eat it. However, in terms of the technical ramifications of is tumah hutra b'tzibur or dechuya b'tzibur, Rav Nachman is going to say it's completely mutter in the context of a tzibur. Meis, we have a kasha. So again, similar kind of context. Let's read it again. If you have a fellow and he's offering the korban mincha associated with a cow, a ram, or a sheep, v'nitmeis biyado, and the flour offering became tameh. So just like in the previous case, we say, look, if you could find a replacement, bring a replacement. But if the only flour available is the flour that you're currently offering, say, all right, just be wise about it, keep your mouth shut, and move on. My lab. Let's say that this is talking about, what are the cows, the rams, and the sheep we're talking about? The cows and the rams of the sheep that we offer on Sukkot. So they're communal offerings, and we're saying, if you could bring a replacement, that would be ideal. So it sounds like, Tumah dechuya b'tzibur. Amalach Rav Nachman, lo. Rav Nachman says, no, it's not talking about a regular communal offering of Sukkot, because that would be Tumah hutra b'tzibur. And rather, Rav Nachman explains each of the three cases, the cows, the rams, and the sheep respectively, that it's talking about a particular case. Parim is talking about a cow offering that is brought for because of the sin of avodah zarah. That even though it's a communal offering, since there's no particular time, since there's no specific time when this offering is to be offered, so therefore it's not hutra b'tzibur, right? A korban that is hutra b'tzibur would be a communal offering that has a specific time that would have to be offered. For example, the offerings of Yom Kippur, it has to be offered on Yom Kippur, and it's for the community. However, this offering that is being brought as an atonement for avodah zarah, there isn't a specific time to bring this. Ideally, you would have to never bring it. So in that case, Tumah dechuya b'tzibur. Elim be'elo shel aharon da'afagav dekviya leizman kevin deyachidu madrinon. When we say rams, we're talking about the ayil le'ola, the ola ram that Aharon brings with him on Yom Kippur. That sure, it's in the context of a communal offering of Yom Kippur. However, it's his own personal ola. And therefore, even though there's a fixed time for it on Yom Kippur, however, since it's a personal offering, so it's not betzibur, it's not communal. So because it's personal, that is why we say that you should bring a replacement. And when it comes to sheep, it's talking about the sheep that come with the minchas ha'omer. That with the korban mincha of the omer that we bring on the second day of Pesach, you also offer a sheep. And therefore, and with that, and what we're saying is, what's the mincha that we're talking about? We're talking about the korban ha'omer, which Rav Nachman already explained earlier, that there is going to be the part of that of the omer that is eaten by the kohanim, and if the omer becomes tameh, so while it's hutra b'tzibur, and the korban will be kosher. However, the Kohanim will not be able to eat it. We want the Kohanim to eat it, so therefore we say bring a replacement. However, Rav Nachman would maintain that Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Meis, we have another kasha. Dam shenitma v'zarko b'shogeg hurtza b'mezid lo hutza. We have a brayso that says if you have blood of a korban, and the blood became tameh, v'zarko, and you threw it nonetheless on the mizbeach, b'shogeg, if you did it by accident, hurtza, that's okay. B'mezid, if you did it on purpose, lo hurtza, it doesn't work. Now, as Rashi points out, even though the tzitz is meratzeh, even though in the Beis Hamikdash the tzitz will sort of fix tumas kodshim, and therefore the blood will be taken care of by the tzitz. However, if you throw it on the mizbeach on purpose, knowing that it's tameh, so then as a fine, we fine you so that, and we treat it as though it won't work. But the fact of the matter is that the tzitz is meratzeh. So kitanya ayid yachid. So we want to argue that what do we need the tzitz to be meratzeh for? Because if it's a communal offering, so it should be completely permitted. It should be mutter. So kitanya ayid yachid. When the brayso says that if you do it on purpose, it doesn't work. So then it's the yachid, an individual's korban. So it's outside of the purview of tumah hutra b'tzibur. Tashma kamanir al ma'atzitz meratzeh. What does the tzitz fix? Al adam v'al basar, blood, meat, v'al chelev, these fats, shenitma, that became tameh. Ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, whether by accident, whether on purpose, ben b'onus, ben b'ratzon, also intentionally, or onus, like totally impossible to prevent. Ben b'yachid, ben b'tzibur, whether individual, whether it's b'tzibur. So what do we see? V'sagadaitech tumah heter hi b'tzibur. And if we say that tumah hutra b'tzibur, that tumah is completely 100% allowed in a community, in a communal offering, lamli l'ratzuye, how come I need to rely upon the tzitz to be meratzeh? If we say like Rav Nachman that the tzitz is that the tumah hutra b'tzibur, how come I have this brayso that says that the tzitz is meratzeh on all sorts of things, whether b'yachid, whether b'tzibur? B'tzibur, who cares about b'tzibur? I don't need the tzitz. Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Tumah is 100% allowed in a community. What do I need the tzitz for? It's completely okay without the tzitz. Rav Nachman answers, Ki katani tzitz meratzeh ad yachid. Okay, so one interesting way to answer is to say that when the brayso is saying that the tzitz is meratzeh, it's not talking about the b'tzibur. It's talking about specifically b'yachid the tzitz is meratzeh. Okay? And b'tzibur, why does it say tzibur in the brayso? To say that just like the tzitz is meratzeh b'yachid, so also b'tzibur it's kosher for other reasons because tumah hutra b'tzibur. Alright, interesting answer. V'bai say more if you want to give you a different reason. Afilu tema b'tzibur b'hanach d'lo kviya lu'zman. You can even say, yeah, when it says that the tzitz is meratzeh b'tzibur, so what do I need it to be meratzeh? I thought it's tumah hutra b'tzibur. It's talking about communal offerings like the Parsha of Avodah that we saw that doesn't have a specific time. That even though it's a communal offering, it doesn't have a specific time to bring it, and therefore we won't say Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, we'll rely upon the tzitz being meratzeh. Okay. Meisvei, we have Akasha v'nos Aharon es Avon HaKodashim. Okay. The pasuk says that Aharon will sort of take care of the sin of the kodshim, of the korbanos, meaning the tzitz will be meratzeh, that if there's too much kodshim, the tzitz will take care of it. Now the brayso asks, avonu noseh, which sin does he carry? What's he fixing? Im avon pigol harek v'namar. If we're talking about pigol, and in this case we're talking specifically if when he slaughters the korban he has intention that he's going to eat it outside of its appropriate place to be eaten. Let's say it was let's say it was a shlamim, so he has intention he's going to eat it outside of Yerushalayim. It says that it won't be appeased, and therefore the tzitz won't be able to be meratzeh for machshavas, what's called machshavas chutz l'mkomo, having an intention to eat it outside of its proper place. V'im avon noser, and if he's also, it's not talking about noser, it's talking about he has an intention of, at least according to Rashi, he has an intention of pigul, but the kind of pigul that he tends to eat it outside of its proper time, meaning noser, it's left over outside of its allotted time, i.e. in this context he's having intention that he's going to eat this korban outside of the proper time that he's allowed to eat it. So again, let's say it's a shlam, so he has 2 days to eat it. He has intention he's going to eat it in 3 days from now. It says you can't, right? It won't be considered, meaning the tzitz won't be able to be meratzeh on that. So rather, says the Brisa, what is the tzitz meratzeh on Tumah? On a Tumah of a korban yachid, says the Brisa. If you have a fellow who brings a korban, and then, let's say, the blood becomes tameh, let's say, so the tzitz will be meratzeh, and it will fix it. How come? Well, because we know that in a communal offering, Tumah hutra b'tzibur, so then since, in a communal offering, Tumah is completely mutter, so we could say that in an individual offering, the tzitz will be meratzeh. So what do we see in this Brisa? The Brisa is invoking the fact that Tumah hutra b'tzibur to explain why the tzitz should be meratzeh for Tumah sakotchim by a yachid. So the Brisa is saying pretty clearly, Tumah hutra b'tzibur, and after Rav Nachman pushed back against all of these proofs against him on the entire Zayin Amud Aleph, we now have a Brisa supporting Rav Nachman against Rav Sheshes that taka Tumah hutra b'tzibur, v'kasha Rav Sheshes, and therefore it's a challenge on Rav Sheshes who says Tumah d'chuyi b'tzibur. Says the Gemara, Tanoihi, you know what? It's machlokas Tanoim. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, it says ben sheyeshna mitzcho, ben she'eno mitzcho meratzeh. There is a Brisa that says that the tzitz, first of all, what is the tzitz? The tzitz has come up a number of times, right? The tzitz is the gold plate that the Kohen Gadol would wear on his forehead. So it says that the tzitz, ben sheyeshna mitzcho, ben she'eno mitzcho. So the tzitz, whether it is presently on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, or whether it is not currently on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, meratzeh, divrei Reb Shimon. It still does what it's meant to do. It's meratzeh, right? So if you have somebody's bringing a korban and it becomes tameh, don't worry, the tzitz will be meratzeh, and that's regardless of if at the current moment it happens to be on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yehuda says no, it must be on the Kohen Gadol's forehead at the time that the Tumah occurred in order for the tzitz to be meratzeh. If it's not currently on his forehead, then it won't be meratzeh for the dam, for the Tumah. Although, yeah, does the dafka have to be on his forehead at the instant that the Tumah occurs, or maybe in order for maybe just before Zrikas Adam? I don't know. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, in order for the tzitz to do its magic, it must be on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Amulo Reb Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim toch yochiach. Reb Shimon argues against Rabbi Yehuda, and he says, but 1 second, I can prove to you that the tzitz is meratzeh regardless of if it's on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol from Yom Kippur. I can prove it from Yom Kippur. She'enodeo mitzcho meratzeh. That when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim to do his avodah on Yom Kippur, he's not wearing the tzitz. He's wearing the big day lavan. He's wearing only the white garments of a regular, ordinary priest. And therefore he's not wearing the tzitz. And yet, if there would be any kind of tumah that happens to korbanos at that time, the tzitz would still be meratzeh, even though the Kohen Gadol is not currently wearing it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says back to Reb Shimon, Hanach leKohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim. Don't bring me proofs from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Shetumah hutra lo b'tzibur. Because says Rabbi Yehuda, Tumah is hutra b'tzibur. Tumah is permitted in the context of a community, and therefore we don't need the tzitz to be meratzeh. And therefore the fact that Aharon is not wearing the tzitz at the time that he goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim is irrelevant, because all of the avodah of the Yom Kippur is communal offerings, which don't need the tzitz to be meratzeh, because Tumah hutra b'tzibur, Michla, which implies that Reb Shimon sover Tumah dechuya b'tzibur, which implies that according to Reb Shimon, Tumah is dechuya b'tzibur, and it's b'di'eved, and therefore we have to rely upon the tzitz to be meratzeh, to make it okay. And therefore he's proving that, so Reb Shimon wants to argue that even though the Kohen Gadol is not currently wearing the tzitz on Yom Kippur, it's still meratzeh, so whether it's on his forehead or not, it's meratzeh. Says Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't have to be meratzeh because Tumah is hutra b'tzibur. So we see a machlokas between Reb Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Shimon says Tumah dechuya b'tzibur. Reb Sheshes would say like Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says Tumah hutra b'tzibur. So Reb Nachman would say like Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, Benishbar Tzitz. Now this is kind of a separate technical Tzitz-oriented discussion. Amar Abaye, Benishbar Tzitz, Duchuli Amlo Pligi Dilo meratzeh. Says Abaye that if the Tzitz was Pasha broken, right, Benishbar Tzitz, if the Tzitz was broken, Duchuli Amlo Pligi Dilo meratzeh, everyone agrees, Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, everyone agrees that it doesn't work. That it won't be meratzeh, it won't sort of appease, fix these the tumah by the kachim. Ki pligi de tali b'sichta. The machlokas between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda is when it's lying on hanging on a peg. Whatever, the Kohen Gadol took it off, put it on a peg. It's not on his forehead right now. That's what the machlokas is. Reb Shimon says, I don't care that it's on a peg, it's meratzeh. Reb Yehuda says, no, it has to be on the forehead. Reb Yehuda savar al meitzach v'nasa. Reb Yehuda's opinion is that, look, the pasuk says al meitzach v'nasa, that the tzitz will be on the forehead of a harin and it will sort of bear the sins of the kodshim. So says Reb Yehuda, if it's on his forehead, al meitzach v'nasa, if it's on his forehead, then it's meratzeh. If not, then it's not. Reb Shimon savar tamid l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem. Reb Shimon says, yeah, but that same pasuk that says that same pasuk says tamid, that it will always be l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem, as an appeasement before God. So we see always, whether it's on his forehead or not, it's always going to be an appeasement. My tamid. So says Reb Shimon, what does it mean tamid? Always. Ilei tamid al mitzcho. If it means that it's always on his forehead, that's impossible. Mimishkachas lo. How could somebody possibly have a tzitz always on his forehead? Milo boy me'el leveisakise. Milo boy meinam. He's going to have to go to the bathroom. He's not going to take the tzitz with him into the bathroom. When he goes to sleep, he's not going to wear the tzitz. So it can't possibly always be on his forehead, because there are times when he necessarily needs to take it off. So what it must mean, says Reb Shimon, is that it's tamid meratzeh, whether it's on his forehead or not, it's meratzeh. Always tamid. Tamid meratzeh, who rather it means that it's always meratzeh, regardless of if it's currently on his forehead. With Rabbi Yehuda nami oksiv tamid. What does Rabbi Yehuda do with the fact that the pasuk says tamid, always, which Reb Shimon argues means that it's always meratzeh, regardless of if it's on his forehead? So ahu tamid shel yasiach daitu mimen. Says Rabbi Yehuda, what tamid means is that when it's on his forehead, he should always be thinking about it. Kidrabba bar Rav Huna, dam Rabba bar Rav Huna, chayav adam lemashmish b'tfilah b'chol shah v'shah. Says Rabba bar Rav Huna that a fellow who's wearing tefillin, he should always be touching it all the time to remind himself that he's wearing tefillin. Which I believe is why, like at certain parts in the davening, we kind of touch the tefillin shel yad, tefillin shel rosh, to make sure that we remember that we're wearing the tefillin. Kavachomer mitzitz. And we learn this from a kavachomer by the tefillin. We learn out from a kavachomer from the tzitz. Umatzitz she'ein bo ela azkara achas amrator al mitzchot tamid shelo yisiach daitu mimenu. That the tzitz, which says, I believe it says kodesh laHashem. We saw in the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos lemaaseh that one of the children of Rabbi Yossi, maybe Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi, said that he went to Rome and he saw the tzitz. Anyways, I think it said kodesh laHashem on the tzitz. And so all it says is the name of God once on the tzitz. And nonetheless, it says, that you shouldn't take your mind off of the tzitz. The Kohen Gadol shouldn't take his mind off of the tzitz. Tefillin, tefillin, which says the name of God many times, then certainly you should be thinking about your tefillin all the time. So what do we see? So we see that by the tzitz, you should always be thinking about it. So says Rabbi Yehuda, that's what tamid means. It doesn't mean like Reb Shimon that it's always meratzeh, regardless of if it's on his forehead or not. No, if it's on his forehead, it's meratzeh. If it's not, then it's not meratzeh. What does tamid mean? It means that when it is on his forehead, the Kohen Gadol should always be thinking about it. Reb Shimon damer tamid meratzeh v'oksav al mitzcho v'nasa. Now, according to Reb Shimon, who says tamid means that it's always meratzeh regardless of if it's on his forehead right now or not. What about the pasuk that says al meitzach v'nasa? That Reb Yehuda learns out that it's on his forehead and it's nosei. If it's not on his forehead, it's not nosei. Oh, that's just for a very practical reason. To say, where does the tzitz go? Does it go around his arm? No, it goes on his forehead. For Reb Yehuda, so now does Reb Yehuda know where the tzitz goes? He learns it out from al meitzach. When it says al meitzach, that's how you know it goes on the forehead. What's v'nasa? Ametzach Vinosa. So the extra Ametzach Vinosa means that yes, it's on his forehead, and only when it's on his forehead does it do its magic. According to Reb Shimon also, why doesn't he learn it out from the fact that why doesn't he learn out the location from Al Meitzach? And then from Vinosa he can learn out, meaning Reb Shimon currently learns out Al Meitzach Vinosa to teach that it goes on his forehead. Reb Yehuda argues, I can learn out forehead from Al Meitzach, and Vinosa I learn out that only while it's on its forehead is it meratzeh. No, Reb Shimon, why don't you do that also? Why don't you say that as well? Enochinami. Al Meitzach Vinosa ma'ovedle. But then what does Reb Shimon do with Vinosa? Says Reb Shimon, yeah, what it means Al Meitzach Vinosa means that if it's fit to go on your forehead, i.e. if it's not broken, as long as it's intact, then it works. If it's broken, then it doesn't work. And that's learned out from Al Meitzach Vinosa. As long as it's fit to go on your forehead, then it could be meratzeh. To the exclusion of if the tzitz breaks, then it won't work. How does Rabbi Yehuda know that if the tzitz breaks, it doesn't work? That's learned out from, it could have said mitzcho, but it says meitzach, so therefore, I guess that's the point. Although it could be that they had like a little bit of a backwards version, but I guess it could have said one, but it says the other, and therefore, we learn out that it has to be not just on his forehead, but it has to be intact. Whereas Reb Shimon doesn't learn of this meitzach mitzcho kind of thing, and therefore he says meitzach v'nosa. That is how we learn out that it has to be intact. And from Talmud we learn that it's always meratzeh, regardless of if it is presently on his forehead. That was Daf Zayin of Masechta Yoma. What do you guys think of Daf Zayin? What are we talking about? So we talked about Tumah hutra b'tzibur, Tumah dechuye b'tzibur. We continued with the machlokas between Rav Sheshes and Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Rav Sheshes says Tumah dechuye b'tzibur. We brought all sorts of kashas against Rav Nachman. He deflected all of them. We then brought a brisa against Rav Sheshes, and we ultimately said, look, it's machlokas tanoim. That Rabbi Yehuda says that Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Rav Shimon says Tumah dechuye b'tzibur. We got into the shaila of tzitz meratzeh. Reb Shimon says that tzitz is meratzeh always, regardless of if it's currently on the Kohen Gadol's forehead or not. Reb Yehuda says no. When it's on the Kohen Gadol's forehead, it's meratzeh. When it's not on the Kohen Gadol's forehead, it's not meratzeh. Along the way, we also learned about how the Kohen Gadol always has to be thinking about the tzitz, and we learn a kal v'chomer from there to the tefillin that you should always be thinking about your tefillin when you're wearing them, which is interesting. Have a great day. Peace.